No. Hello, I'm Lisa Tyler. I'm your host of Senior Connections. This is our monthly show brought to you by Senior Resources, your area agency on aging for Muskegon, Oceana, and Ottawa counties. We get together every month and we have conversations with guests about all kinds of things pertaining to older adults, their caregivers, and those who care for them. It might be Medicare, prescription management, driving issues for older adults, something health related, all kinds of things. And this month I'm really excited to have with me for the first time Andrea Nofsinger. She is a social worker with Harbor Palliative Care, and she works with the Chartered Healthcare Planning Coalition, which is how I know her from my work co-chairing that. And I think we've talked about that work a little bit more, but today we're going to talk more about advanced care planning and some palliative care conversations. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we'll talk a little bit more about advanced directives, but I always like to give our viewers a little idea of who you are. So tell us about Andrea.
Yeah, so I came to Harbor Palliative Care and the Chartered Healthcare Planning Coalition in October of 2018. So I'm coming up on a year there.
Wonderful.
And they brought me on board because our team is growing, but also because of a lot of what I was doing in my past field relates to palliative care. So I come to palliative care from the nursing home world. So I spent about 15 years in the nursing home as an aide, and then I did my MSW internship in a nursing home and as a social worker. So lots of experience there.
So what got you interested in work? I mean, a nursing home isn't something that lots of young people think of going into. So what got you interested in working with older adults in general?
Their history and the richness that they bring. If you are able to sit down with somebody who's 65 and older and have a conversation about their life, it's pretty amazing. And that just got me interested in wanting to help them emotionally cope and socially cope and help them in any way I could.
Did anything in college help prepare you or open up those ideas for you? Because I'm just always intrigued by, you hear people, well, I want to work with kids or I want to work with this, and you don't hear as much about people thinking about it. Sometimes I hear people say, well, because I had this experience with my grandparents or something like that, but I'm always just interested in how colleges and universities are exposing their students to that.
Yeah, I would say it wasn't so much my undergrad. I went to a pretty liberal arts school, so I got exposure to a lot of things, but after I graduated, I got my CNA license when I graduated from undergrad, and that brought me to the nursing home world. That's where you use your CNA a lot of the times. But I knew I didn't want to be a CNA forever.
CNA is a certified nurse assistant.
Yes,
right?
yes. And I knew I didn't want to do that forever, but I loved being in a nursing home, which is not something you hear often either, right? And I knew I had other things that I could do. I had other skills that I could bring to that field. So I just started looking into programs and what field that would bring me to. I didn't know that it was going to be social work specifically. So it was just a lot of research on my own, and it just all kind of came together for me.
That's great. Because some people do go into social work and then kind of fall into this somehow, but you came to it a different, went for the older adults and then figured out how to do that. That's wonderful.
And because I already had the skill in the nursing home, it just
flowed nicely.
Yeah, it flowed really nicely, to stay in that population.
Well, super. We'll talk a little bit more about your experiences. So it's May, which is Older Americans Month, which is always a really fun time for us in the, at least the area agencies on aging. We think it's really important. We think every day is Older Americans Day, obviously, but in this month, we like to recognize that. But we're going to talk, even though that's what this month is, we're going to talk a little bit about April. And April, from our perspective, is something called National Healthcare Decisions Day, which was April 16th this year. And the purpose is to help people across the United States understand the value of advanced healthcare planning. And so we have a local coalition, the Chartered Healthcare Planning Coalition, that Andrea and I serve on. And our coalition managed to come together with some funding to get, you do some of your work, is paid for by that. And we've been working a lot on that. So we just had a community event last month that if we have time we'll talk about, but we'll talk about that later. But let's talk in general about advanced healthcare planning and advanced directives specifically. It's not something that's just for older adults. That we're talking older adult issues here, but it's something that you and I at our ages, both you're a little younger than me, much younger. But we don't always give a lot of thought to that until we're in a situation, and frequently an emergency or some dire situation where mom or dad or grandma or grandpa is in the hospital, and now we have to make decisions. So there are studies that say that only 18 to 36% of people have an advance directive, and a lot of times, unfortunately, doctors aren't aware that their patients have advance directives. And an advance directive, just to be clear, it's a legal document that tells healthcare providers who you wish to help you make decisions, an advocate, and what treatments you'd want or don't want, and basically kind of how you want to be treated in a hospital if you can't tell them yourself. So it's getting other people lined up or making sure that there's documents. That's a pretty safe way to say it. So some questions people might have. There's lots of them. Let's start with the basics. Who needs an advance directive, Andrea?
Everybody 18 and older. The more people that has it, the better. People often think that once your next of kin can speak for you, and when we're 18, our parents are still doing a lot for us. I know my parents still did when I was 18, but legally, you're your own person, so you should have the legal documents to support that. So if something did happen, your family can look on that document. But everybody 18 and older should have an advance directive.
Absolutely, and it's one of these things. I've got a 20-year-old who's is going to college. And I can't access his grades. I can access a limited amount on things. And the same thing, I see in Facebook groups, people having conversations about, you really should almost have these kind of things when your kids go off to college too, right? Because they're not going to necessarily tell you anything. Doesn't matter, I gave birth to this child, they're an adult, and if you're not, you might need a power of attorney or make sure that you're their advocate legally so that they can do that. So it really is something that's for everybody 18 and over.
Yep.
So why does somebody need that advance directive?
Because if you were to develop sudden illness, or you have a chronic illness and you're hospitalized and you're not able to speak for yourself, that advance directive has your healthcare goals listed on there. And your healthcare goals and preferences are put into writing, and your healthcare team can reference that.
Exactly. So why do they need to do it in writing, though? Couldn't you and I have a conversation about it?
Yeah, we should have a conversation about it. Yeah, so that's kind of where everything starts, is right, we have a conversation. So you have a conversation with your family, with your medical team, and that's your building block. And then you put it into writing. So it is great to have the conversation, but if you're not able to speak for yourself, nobody may know that conversation, or the person that does know that conversation isn't available. And legally, the medical team, in crisis, is not going to hunt around for the person who may have had that conversation with you. So putting it in writing is a safe way to have your wishes followed.
So whether it's in writing or a conversation, when both are important, we'll talk about that. What are some key points that people should be making sure that they cover in that?
Yeah, so you should, in an advance directive, in the conversation piece, you should cover your wishes for artificial ventilation, so breathing machine, whether or not you want artificial nutrition or hydration, so like tube feeding, CPR, or do not resuscitate. So in certain circumstances, what do you want for those things? Who you want to speak for you. That's the patient advocate. That should be in your advance directive and part of the conversation. I think those are some key things. There's some other things. But
so if I didn't have that in writing, and I'd had a conversation, and I've been in an accident or something, and now I can't speak for myself, and if my husband knew what I wanted, but there's nothing in writing, are the doctors going to listen to that, or are they kind of obligated? What if I had said I didn't want any extreme measures, I didn't want to be resuscitated if I was brain dead, and he tells them that, is that enough, or are they still going to have to do everything they can to?
They may do everything that they can, especially if there's like an out-of-town family, or if all of your children are of age and they say,
there's any discrepancy, disagreements.
Yes. Doctors are obligated then to provide full measures because not everybody's on board really. So that's another importance to having that document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, and we have those conversations in the coalition. You know, people go, the medical professionals have been trained to save lives. So that's what they'll do unless there's something very clear that outlines that somebody has a different wish on that,
Right.
correct?
Right.
And that's the reason they go into that
Right.
usually. So let's talk a little bit about more about a patient advocate. Who can you appoint as a patient advocate and what kind of decisions can they make, assuming we've got that in writing?
Yes, so you can appoint anybody 18 and older to be your patient advocate. There's a large myth, or there's just kind of the community perception that you have to appoint your spouse or like your oldest child, 18 and over child. But you can appoint anybody. You can appoint, if you've had that conversation with your pastor or your sibling or a friend.
It could be my boss at work if that person's agreed, right?
Yes.
So they do have to agree to be the patient advocate,
so they have
correct?
to, in writing, agree, accept that they are willing to serve for you. And they're signing that, or they're accepting that they will serve for you in difficult times. They can make difficult decisions in really difficult, stressful times. Even if they don't agree with you, with your wishes, that they're still willing to carry out your wishes. That they're going to be a strong advocate for you, because there might be some discord within your family, but if you want to make sure that they're going to say, this is what this person wanted, this is what we've talked about, this is what's documented, this is what mom wanted or dad wanted.
So that's a document that's signed, dated. Does it have to be drawn up by an attorney? Does it have to be witnessed, notarized? How does that?
Yep, so the advance directive, the accepting part, the patient, the power of attorney portion doesn't have to be witnessed, right? So the advance directive has to be witnessed. So when I'm saying here are my preferences, here are my wishes, and I'm signing that document, I need two witnesses.
Okay.
That cannot be family or anybody that has a vested interest in like financial benefit from my passing. So the witnesses need to see me sign it, but the patient advocate, when they accept, that doesn't have to be witnessed. So, if I did my patient advocate, my advance directive paperwork, I can mail it to my patient advocate, and they can sign it and mail it back to me. So that part's pretty easy. We want to make it as easy as possible, but as complete and legal as possible.
And should somebody just have one patient advocate?
Yes, they can have just
Because
one.
you could have a conflict otherwise, right?
Yeah, but ideally you want 2 or 3, because what if I appointed my spouse, my husband, and we're in a car accident together?
Right. Okay.
Then nobody is left to speak on my behalf or carry out my wishes. So you want 2 people or 3. Most forms have the option for 3 advocates. And they serve in order. So they don't serve together, but they serve in
sequential. If this person isn't available, or they're out of town, or we just can't reach them, or whatever, then we go to the second one.
Right.
And then ideally, you need to have the same conversation with each of those people to make sure that they're going to carry out your wishes, even if they're opposed and all of those.
So working in the nursing home, I had that situation come up a couple times where I had the document, and the document had a patient advocate, and I had to call the advocate, and they had no idea that they were this person's patient advocate. So it does happen, so you should have that conversation with the person you want to speak for you.
Okay.
And they should know your goals. They should, you can't plan for every scenario, but they should have a good understanding.
Are you allowed to change that after you've done that?
Yes, you, as long as you are competent and have your capacity, you can change your or your advance directive and patient advocate as many times
And then
as you
it's
want.
just going to take whatever the most recent dated one is?
Yes, so you want to make sure that when you change your advocate that everyone has a copy, so you've submitted, handed out copies, that your physician has a recent copy. Any medical team that's involved with you has a recent copy each time you change it.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about that, the people having copies. How do you make sure that your doctor does, and even if your doctor does, how do you know that the hospital, because if you're in that situation, you're not going to the doctor's office where you're going to be incapacitated, you're in the hospital.
Yeah.
So how do How do you know, you've sent it to your patient advocates, so they should have it, but how do we make sure that they're followed? And I know 100% of the time they're not necessarily, which is something else we can talk about, but how do you make sure, how many people should have them and who should have them?
Yeah, so all the people you appoint or, want to be your patient advocate, they should have a copy. Your primary care, if you have a preferred hospital, they should have a copy. We also have a nifty little online database that we can use, Great Lakes Health Connect, and I can upload those documents for free. So most every healthcare organization in Michigan has access to that, so they can pull that.
So if I was in an accident across the state, hopefully they can still pull that up.
A lot of people have their advanced directive like on the refrigerator, just like as if they had to have a do not resuscitate order. Like they usually go or can go hand in hand on the refrigerator, and your people keep them in their glove box. If they're in a car accident.
So first responders kind of know to look in some of these kind of spots.
Yes.
They're probably going to look on a refrigerator. They might look, if you're in a car accident, they might look in the glove box to see if there's paperwork.
And most advanced directives have like a little wallet card. So you can
Ours
put,
does.
Ours does, and you can put it in your wallet that says you have it, so they know that they can look for that.
Okay.
But your advanced directive does no good if it is kept in the safe, if it's kept in a box in the basement, if nobody has access to it. I still have patients on palliative care that families tell me, I will look for it. I know we have it. I just don't know where it's at. And that does no good, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So having lots of copies available is advisable. So we might have to kill a small tree for that. But, but hopefully with the Great Lakes Health Connect, we've got those uploaded so that at least in the medical field, they can find those more.
Yeah.
So how hard are they to complete?
People think they're really hard and they're really scary and intimidating, but they are not hard. And that's part of my role. So as the Advanced Care Planning Coordinator with Charted and the social worker with Harbor Palliative, my role is to make it as easy as possible. And most of the advanced care planning facilitators in our region would say that that's their responsibility too, is to make it easy. So most advanced directives that are out in the public are easy to read. The language is not, it's, at a basic level that most people can get it.
This isn't lawyer speak.
No, I mean, if you, I've seen the advanced directives drawn up by lawyers, and it is really hard to read and decipher, and if you're in a crisis, we can't spend time reading, going through all that, right? You can still use your lawyer, that's fine, but we can make it really easy for you.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about other people. So you and other people in our community have gone through training on how to facilitate these conversations, right? So talk a little bit about what that involves. And so because, for example, Senior Resources is one of 3 agencies at Tanglewood Park. You're at Tanglewood Park every month. So let's talk about that. When you're there, how do they get to you? And then what do you do? How long do you usually spend with somebody?
Yep, so we'll take it back to the advanced care planning, or the facilitators. So I'm facilitator. Most every social worker at Harbor Hospice is a facilitator, so they can have those conversations. And then there's a couple of facilitators in the community. So we've all gone through Respecting Choices program. Most of us have gone through the first and second steps, and there's 3 steps.
And that's a national program, right?
I believe so, so we've got some good training. So, we're not just making it up as we go. We have a system and a forum and an organized way to have that conversation. So I bring that to Tanglewood the second Thursday of every month from 10 to noon. And I usually spend about an hour with each person. If I need to spend more, I will. So let's say if there's back-to-back appointments, I can take your information and we can pick up the conversation elsewhere. And that's the perk of my position at Charted, is I get to spend the time with the community member. I can meet with them 10 times, 20 times, however many times it takes for us to have the conversation, a hearty conversation, and document it. I'll do it.
So we've got forms on the chartedmuskegon.org website that they can look for, and it's a form that we used to have one that we've probably talked about over the years called 5 Wishes, which is still a viable form, but we switched to one that came from Making Choices Michigan that was out of the Kent County area so that we could be regionally aligned, right? So it might look intimidating because there's a few different parts, including that little wallet card, but there's one that's about just the patient advocate, and a lot of it's instructions, or it's giving a lot of examples, right? Of when you're thinking about your wishes, you think of, well, I do not resuscitate. People hear about the DNR form a lot, but there's, the feeding and the hydration, and what situations might you want to not, or it might be, you'll say, well, if there's not enough brain activity, well, there's all kinds of different levels of all that, right? So that's where a lot of this conversation is so important with people.
Yeah.
Just filling out that form is super important, but you also need to share that and have the conversations about, and that's what you're helping them figure out, what is the quality of life that they want, is what it's really about. Right?
Yep. And that's what it comes down to. So, we can try to plan for every scenario, but that's going to be impossible. So we're going to narrow it down to a couple big ones, So if you were in a situation where you can't recognize who you're with, who you are, where you are, or have a meaningful conversation, what does that mean to you? How do you want to spend your life? How would you want your family to treat you medically? So we try to narrow it down to that, because we can go down that rabbit hole of like, what if medically this happened to me, or what if I was in this scenario? The more information we have, the better. But the facilitators, we can narrow it down a little bit. Yeah.
Sometimes people even want to have conversations down to really minute levels about whether they want music in the room and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And can that be part of it as well?
Yeah. So on our on Charted's advanced directive form, there's actually a spot to write in those specific things. So when people are stumped when we're having that conversation, I say, well, it's things like music and flowers and family. Some people put a limit into how many family members they want around them when they're actively passing, just because sometimes that's not a calm space. Or do they have a bucket list they want to accomplish in the last days? Or that's where we would put that. So that's really making that form personal, because everybody wants something different.
Right. And these are not easy conversations to have. Nobody really wants to talk about death.
No.
It's kind of a taboo in our society. It has
Yes.
been for a long time, but last I checked, it's happening to all of us.
Yes.
So what we always say in our coalition, right, is it's really a gift to those you love to do this form and do it before a crisis. So really at any age. I'm young and healthy. I should still have one though, right?
Yes, and that's the best time to have one. So when you're not in a crisis, when you're not having a lot of anxiety about your health, before a chronic health issue happens, that's the best time to make some really informed decisions, to have a calm, clear head about what you want, and to have a doctor.
And then you can change it down the road if you want to do that. So I think that's really what's important for people to remember. You should have one even as a young adult, because things happen. You just never know what you want to do it while you can think logically. Think about, it's difficult to think if you're 20 years old about that happening. But when we just had our National Healthcare Decisions Day event, and we had a local author, we had plenty of some college students there, right?
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to see that it wasn't all older people there.
Right.
And it wasn't all of us on our coalition. It was, we had a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds there who were doing as some extra credit in the class, granted, but I think it had lots of conversations about that. Have you had very many young people to talk to, or does it tend to be older adults?
It tends to be older adults, which I would like to see that change. Yes, and the show is focused on older adults, but I would like to see it change. I would really like, ideally, we would like 18 and older, so really hitting that 18 to 30 age range. But even if I had people in their 30s and 40s that had this conversation, I had to really hone it in on my husband to have those conversations, because you're right, it's not something we want to think about. And when people, when I start addressing this with my patients, mostly on the palliative care side, because they probably weren't expecting that conversation. Uncharted, when people contact me, they know that's coming, right? But when I have palliative care patients who are in their 30s and 40s, I kind of have to bring it back and give them an example and say, I'm in my 30s, and I have mine. So, and I don't have a chronic illness. So if you're in your 40s and you have a chronic illness, it's probably a good idea that we start this process. So I like to do that. Like, let's bring it to real life. Let's give a real life example. I have one, and I'm in my 30s. So yeah.
Do you have any good stories of anybody that has come to you seeking things and just feels any relief or anything after that happens?
Yeah, I had a married couple that came into my charted appointments at Tanglewood, and they were just, the husband she drug him into the appointment, and she said, we have to get this done, and I have a pretty fun, lighthearted personality, so I'm able to help those hard conversations and hard questions, help people feel at ease with them. And so by the end, we were laughing and cracking jokes, and I had to go back for another session with them because there was 2 of them, so it took a little bit longer. And they just kept saying, I'm so happy, like, this was so easy, I'm so happy. I had to go back to their house and they were trying to feed me food, and I had to respectfully decline, and he was trying to pay me, and I said, no, I can't, I'm doing this for free. But he was just so appreciative, and they didn't realize how easy it was. And I took a copy, I made copies for their family, I uploaded it, I brought a copy to their primary care physician for them. Wonderful. Just trying to make it as easy as possible, and that's what we want to do.
So that's the important thing to remember. So how does somebody get a hold of you? You can go to the chartedmuskegon.org website if somebody's internet savvy that way. How does somebody get a hold of you to schedule something?
Yes.
Because you can do more than just those 2 hours once a month at Tanglewood, right?
Yeah, so I can do this 4 days a week for 8 hours a day. So keep me busy. I want, this is what I want. I want to do this, and this is what we are offering to the community. So people can contact me at my Harbor Palliative office, and the number is 231-728-6861, and that is my direct line. So you won't get welcome to Harbor Palliative and Hospice. But they can contact me and I can schedule an appointment with them. And I'm pretty flexible. I can meet them. I'll meet them at a coffee shop, at church, anywhere. Anywhere that's convenient. Yep.
So that's the big thing we want to remind people. Even though it was National Healthcare Decisions Day and the things that we celebrate last month, it's always really important to have this conversation, to put this in writing so that the people around you and that love you know what your wishes are, and it's never too early to plan that. Again, I think if you think of it as a gift to the people you love, it's maybe an easier conversation to have. I know I've had it with my husband and I, and brother and sister-in-law. I had it with my in-laws last year. I had it with my mother last year. It's not the easiest thing, but it's essential. And there are national stories that you've heard in the past about people, where you've seen the families battling over that. And I think that's enough reason. I remember those from years ago, where there was a case in Florida, and it was somebody young. So I think if you think about that, and you wouldn't want to see that happening and have everybody on the same page, and to be able to do that before a crisis where everybody already is stressed about everything else, to do it early would be super important. So just remember that there's help available. You don't have to do that alone. Andrea is great to talk to, very easy. She'll help you along with it. So tell us one more time your direct number.
Yep, so my direct number is 231-728-6861.
And if you can't remember that, as always, you can call 211. But Andrea is also at Tanglewood Park every second Thursday of the month from 10 to noon. And you can call 733-8643 and set up those appointments as well. So we hope that more people will do that. Andrea, thanks for joining us. This half hour flew by, as always. So again, if you can't remember, call 211, tell them you want some help with that. They'll know to connect you with Charted. And we'll see you next month. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Went fast.